Okay, folks, we are back, and looks like we are going to get some more of this Tovia Singer book going here. And if you remember, I left off on this little page here. We're on page, I think we're on page 16. Yeah, this is 16. If you don't know what this is basically an anti-missionary screed. I'll call it a screed because the Jews are upset that there's over 8,000 Jews of their fellow brothers and sisters who are converting to Yeshua Messiah, or Jesus Christ, as the church calls him. And they're finding that in those fellowships, there is life. And so they're converting. And it's taken them away from the dead religion of Judaism and to the kind of living example of what an assembly should be, complete with miracles. And this is what is convincing the Jews. The work of the Ruach HaKodesh is what is convincing them. So this guy, Tovia Singer, he is all upset about that, and he wants to try to make his case that these 8,000 Jews a year that are converting to Messiah are just very unintelligent, ignorant people that don't know the scriptures. And maybe some of them are. But he also implies that those of us who have been studying the scriptures for years are also just, totally uneducated people who don't know the scriptures. And so he has written this book to try to entice, to woo some of these Jewish people back. So it continues on here. I think the last part of video I did, we were going over this, like the Jews for Jesus, when they are ministering to Jews, they have a tract that they want all of their volunteers to follow. And because it presents Jesus in a way that will be more acceptable to a Jewish person, because let's face it, the Gentile Jesus and the way the churches are, they have idolatry in them. They have things that Jewish people are going to pick up on right away. And that Jewish people are afraid that they're going to lose their Jewishness if they just decide to accept Yeshua as the method of redemption for their Torah breaking. So he continues on here. Remember that this is written by an adversary of our faith. I want you to be clear on that. And so me going through this material is in no way an endorsement of this man's book, but I'm reading it so that with commentary to familiarize those of you who may run into a guy like this, and perhaps beguile some member in your family, as has happened to me. You know who you are out there. So here we go. It says, this is Tovia now. The Christian world is far more variegated than the Jewish world. In fact, the church is composed of a dizzying number of competing denominations which differ on numerous fundamental theological issues. I don't know if I'd say they were fundamental theological issues. That seems a bit of an overstretch there, doesn't it? He's got something here in this box here. A serious missionary problem exists on any campus with evangelical fundamentalist Christians. Apparently, they're the worst. They're the worst sort in Tovia's economy. At a baseball game, it is sometimes difficult to know who the players are without a scorecard. So let's break down the Christian world for a moment so that we know precisely to whom we are referring. Sorting out the complex Christian world, Roman Catholic and literal Protestants are generally not interested in Jewish evangelism. That's probably because those groups are practically already denying the faith. But he goes on and says here, the Roman Catholic Church with more than 1 billion members worldwide is by far the largest denomination in Christendom. Despite Rome's past bitter relationship with the Jewish people, today's Catholic Church is for the most part not interested in converting Jews. Well, they probably figure they're too far gone. I don't know what they think, but they're not really evangelical type churches, are they? I need not worry that a Catholic priest is going to evangelize a Jewish patient at a hospital. If anything, he is one of the people who will show me where I can secure a kosher meal. Well, that's pretty good. Another particularly important segment of the Christian world, especially in North America, is the Protestant community. For our purposes, we will overgeneralize and divide the Protestant world into two groups, mainline and fundamentalist Christians, i.e., those who adhere to the Bible and to the direct gospel commands, or those who have fallen into tradition and the teachings of men. That's how I would interpret that. Mainline or liberal Protestant denominations, Methodist, Episcopalian, Unitarian. I don't even know if I'd consider Unitarian to be a Christian. They're polytheistic in many ways. Not at all interested in converting Jews. Liberal-leaning Protestant denominations tend to shy away from Jewish evangelism. The other group within the Protestant community, however, is motivated and vocal. These are the fundamentalist born-again Christians who are unyielding in their staunch commitment to convert Jews to their zealous brand of Christianity. I thought we were supposed to be zealous for our faith. And I can count myself as one of these people. So I guess I would be like a noxious, odor to this guy. Anyway, there are two rules about Jewish evangelism that must always be kept in mind. The Christian who makes the very first critical and successful contact with the Jew is almost never a professional missionary. It will not be a paid staff member of Jews for Jesus or Chosen People Ministries. Rather, it most likely to be a layperson, perhaps a secretary at the office, a roommate in college, or someone on the same swim team who makes that initial effective connection. Only after the lay evangelical Christian has made this preliminary contact will the professional missionary step into the conversion process. Second, the Christian lay person who makes that all-important first contact with the Jew is invariably a Gentile, actually, that he thinks they're Gentile. That's because he doesn't acknowledge the house of Israel, the lost sheep of Israel that were brought back by Jesus. And in the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus, they then become part of the Israel of God. Even many church people don't even recognize their own identity. It is extremely rare for a Hebrew Christian to successfully make that initial contact with a Jew. The perceived betrayal of the Jewish people by the Hebrew Christians' apostasy, by the Hebrew Christians' apostasy discredits his message in the mind of a Jew. Interesting. I wonder what he's getting at here. Hebrew Christians are... Oh, I know what he's saying. He's saying that because they're not idolaters, like the rest of the church folks with their Ishtar and, their Tammuz, that because these people are keeping Torah too, and yet they believe in Yeshua, he says in the mind of the Jew, they're discredited. Actually, what's happening is cognitive dissonance. They're so used to the church being this way, they couldn't possibly conceive that there might be a way through the middle. There might be a way to acknowledge the commandments in Torah and still accept the testimony of Yeshua Messiah. But this is his take on it. Gentile Christians, on the other hand, do not repel Jews. Well, if that's the case, why is he in such a tizzy to write this book when it's not these other guys that are bringing Jews in? That it's the Messianics who are making such great strides in conversion. Think about that. Gentile parishioners, rather than Hebrew Christians, are most effective in evangelizing the Jews. I really doubt that. Only after the lay Gentile born-again Christian has made that first crucial and successful encounter with a Jew will the Hebrew Christian missionaries step in to finalize the conversion. Oh, okay, so what he's saying here is that then the Jewish believers in Yeshua then step in. So the initial one is somebody who really doesn't have the idea of Torah. All right, in essence, the central role the Christian missions like Jews for Jesus play to act as a clearinghouse and support system for evangelical churches worldwide. As a result, these Jewish missions spend much of their resources and manpower teaching Gentile churchgoers the art of Jewish evangelism. Missionaries, therefore, spend considerable time in churches encouraging Christians who are reluctant to preach the gospel to their Jewish neighbors, classmates, and co-workers. How serious a problem are these Protestant fundamentalist Christians? How many born-again Christians are there in the United States? Their numbers are not small. They are the largest voting bloc in the United States, according to most estimates. There are well over 70 million Americans who identify themselves as born-again Christians. That is nearly 1 in 5 Americans is part of this army of lay people dedicated to share their faith with a Jew. When I spoke at the Nashville Synagogue a number of years ago, an Assemblies of God minister bluntly told me that he would rather convert 1 Jew than 50,000 Gentiles. Well, I can see that being the case because Jews are notoriously hard nuts to crack because they are so mired in centuries and centuries of tradition. Think about it. Even after Yeshua did those miracles in the sight of the Pharisees, they still went about trying to kill him. Remember Lazarus, when Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead? The Pharisees were so upset. Not only did they want to kill Jesus, they wanted to kill Lazarus and make him dead again. Because what Yeshua was doing made them look so bad they had egg on their face because they were so hoity-toity. They were the only ones who had the connection with Almighty Yah. Turns out that Yeshua was the one. He was the source of the connection, not them. And that made them look bad. So they wanted not only to kill Yeshua, they had to kill Lazarus too, a second time. Well, they didn't kill him the first time. The first time, disease got him. When he was raised from the dead, they wanted to kill him by violence, Lazarus. Well, think about that. How ingrained this rabbinical mindset is. All right, several reasons why fundamentalist Christians are obsessed with converting Jews. The reason that naturally comes to mind is why us? Why the overzealous effort to convert Jews? Why are these fundamentalist Christians so consumed with bringing the Jewish people to know Jesus? Why has the largest Protestant denomination in the United States, the Southern Baptist Convention, repeatedly passed numerous resolutions encouraging its more than 15 million members to target and evangelize the Jewish people? To begin with, the New Testament specifically prioritizes Jews for conversion. That's right, first to the Jew, then to the Gentile. In the book of Matthew, when Jesus is instructing his apostles, he warns them, go not into the way of the Gentiles, but only go to lost sheep house Judah. Well, he's clearly misinterpreting this, isn't he? Totally misinterpreting this. The lost sheep of the house of Israel are the Gentiles. They're not the Jews. He's totally misunderstanding this. Are the Jews lost? No, the Jews were never lost. They retained their nationhood. Who was lost? Ephraim. Ephraim was lost. They were carried away by Assyria and then Babylon, that later became Babylon. And they were divorced, according to the prophet Jeremiah. Ephraim was divorced. The northern kingdom was divorced. Okay? They lost their nationhood. So here he is. Tovia Singer doesn't even know who the lost sheep of the house of Israel are. He thinks that they're speaking about Jews. No, it's not Jews, because Jews were not lost as a nation. All right, Christian Bible prioritizes Jews. The Apostle Paul echoes the identical sentiment when he declares, for I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it is the power of God to salvation for everyone who believes, for the Jew first and also for the Greek. Okay? So in the Apostle Paul's economy, he wanted to go to his brethren first. Remember, Paul was of the house of Judah. But he did not want to, but when his brethren rejected his message, he went to the Gentiles, which remember, the house of Judah, or rather the house of Israel, Ephraim, had lost its identity. So they were Gentiles now. They were those who were circumcised, but cast their circumcision away. They cast their circumcision away. So, because of that, the house of Israel Yeshua wanted his disciples to go to them and evangelize them, okay, because they were the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So Tovia Singer can't wrap his mind around that part there. We find a unique emphasis on reading the Jews in the New Testament, especially in the Gospels. See, Tovia Singer is putting the house of Israel and the Jew in the same basket. They're totally different groups. That's his error. We find a unique emphasis on reaching the Jews in the New Testament, especially in the Gospels, almost to the exclusion of the Gentiles. A second reason for this obsession relates to the church's fascination with eschatology, the study of the end times. Fundamentalist Christians are consumed by the prophecies surrounding the end of days. Are we living in those times? Imagine Tovia asking this question when they're already talking about taking away everybody's property, putting a mark either in the forehead or the right hand so that none may buy or sell unless they have the mark. They're already talking about that. Imagine the chutzpah of Tovia asking this question. Let's see what he says. Are we living in these end times? They want to know when Messiah will come and return. How will this take place? To which nations did the prophet Ezekiel refer when he described how apocalyptic nations would wage war against Jerusalem before the final hour leading to the Messianic age? That's in Ezekiel 38-39. Christian bookstores typically set aside an entire section dedicated to eschatological inquiry. Well, eschatology has to do with the timing of events of the prophetic nature in the Bible. That's what that's talking about. Of course, the Jewish people eagerly await the end of days and the coming of the Messiah. This faith is one of Maimonides. Now, Maimonides was basically a famous rabbi. 13 fundamental principles of faith. However, the Jewish concept of the Messiah in Hebrew is entirely different from that of Christians. Well, not really. Christians have at least the Jews have half the picture of a conquering, ruling monarch. They seized onto that, but the Jews have deceitfully taken the suffering servant part out of Isaiah 53. And I'm sure we're going to get here and hear about all of his explanation for that as to how he'll wish that away. But the actual biblical scriptural Messiah is a suffering servant and then a ruling monarch. That's the pattern. All right, so evangelical Christians widely believe that the mass conversion of the Jews will bring about Jesus' second coming. How does all this apocalyptic speculation relate to our subject? At the end of the book of Matthew, Jesus is quoted as making a very important statement. I will not return until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. That's right. Since Jesus was addressing a Jewish audience at the time, he made this statement. Christians had often understood this proclamation to have one meaning. Jesus will not make his second coming until large numbers of Jews embrace the church. Well, the church is a little bit off on that too, because really, what's going to happen is the Jews are going to realize they've been betrayed by the Antichrist. And they're going to be on the precipice of annihilation. And it could be through the witness of the two witnesses, as it talks about in Revelation. They will continually testify to Jesus as Messiah and say to the Jewish people, you missed the boat. All you need to do now to get God's favor and have him help you in this certain annihilation is for you to believe upon Yeshua Messiah. Believe upon him. Repent for the sin of taking part in crucifying him. And that'll be the thing. Then they'll say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. And then that will be that catalyst which unleashes the power of God down over that area and will protect them. And then it may be synonymous with pictures in Revelation that talk about the heavens opening and Yeshua comes back on a white stallion with all the host of heaven and the saints of Elohim are with him. And it talks about how a sword shall come out of his mouth, and with which he shall slay the adversaries of Elohim. He'll just slay them. They're almost on the verge of destroying what's left of the Jewish nation, and he will come back and stop that. So that's essentially the reality of the picture of what's happening. But he goes on here, he says, the Jews, in a sense, are holding up the show. Many evangelicals believe that Jesus' second coming is imminent, and Jews must be converted post-haste and en masse in order to enable Jesus' return. Well, that's not necessarily, like I say, I know that some churches believe this, but that's not necessarily what has to happen. The Jews can continue in unbelief right up to the end. And then they when they see that they've been betrayed, when they see that they are upon certain annihilation, then they might finally submit to the truth that Jesus is the master, that Jesus was the atonement for their sin, and that they missed the boat the first time around, but they're not going to miss the boat the second time around, or else they be completely destroyed. Finally, the most significant reason for the church's preoccupation with the Jews stems from the unique credibility problem that only Judaism presents to Christendom. That's pretty arrogant, isn't it? Jesus was a Jew, and Christians claim that he is the promised Messiah to whom all the prophets spoke. The idea of the Messiah, a man who will come at the end of days to usher in a utopian society of love, peace, and universal knowledge of God, is an exclusively Jewish idea. Actually, that's not true. It's not exclusively Jewish. That's everywhere in the scripture, and it's true that Yeshua will return. Even in Zechariah 14, it says that he'll come down and inaugurate the Atid Lavo, 1,000-year reign of Christ. Fundamentalist Christians insist that if Jews would only look in their own Hebrew scriptures, they would discover that Jesus is bouncing off every page. That is true. I believe it. Of course, the Jews don't believe it, neither does Tovia. It stands to reason, therefore, that if in fact Jesus had been prophesied Messiah, the Jews should have been the first to follow Jesus and his teachings. They should have overwhelmingly embraced the claims of the church. Actually, in a how do you say, a vacuum, it might stand to reason. I can see where he's going here, but guess what? God had to find a way to bring all of those lost sheep of the house of Israel in. And so, you know what the scripture actually says? That God hath blinded the eyes of the Jewish authority. He blinded the eyes because of his preordinate will. His preordinate will, he blinded the eyes of them so that there would be a space that will allow the lost sheep of Israel to come into the fold. Because an entire nation had been carried away. And God cares about all the children of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. Cares about all of them, all 12, not just 2 or at most 3, Judah, Benjamin, and some of Levi, which is the Jews today. He cares about all of them. Okay, and so instead, the very people who brought the idea of Messiah to the world, and the only people who can read their scriptures in its original language, are the very people who reject the claims of the church. Not all of them, though. I would bet you that there are a significant number of rabbis who secretly know and understand that Jesus really was the Messiah and their people, but they dare not say it or they'll be cut off. They'll be cut off from anything. In fact, I happen to know for a fact that's the case in reading various accounts where ministers had secretly talked to some of these rabbis. And they're still doing the Judaism thing, but inside they know and they acknowledge it verbally, secretly. Yes, we know we missed the boat the first time around. Some of them do, but not Tovia. He's headlong into his position. Whether right or wrong, he's going to go headlong. He'll be headlong, all right. This has always been the troubling reality to Christendom since its inception. Only the conversion of the Jew to Christianity lends credibility to the church. It is for this reason that only the conversion of a Jew to Christianity can lend credibility to the church, never the conversion of a Gentile. Why not? The church has been converting members of the house of Israel and bringing them back into the Israel of God for centuries. That's a silly statement on his part. And yes, to convert a Jew That is a blessed thing. And I understand why they want to do that, simply because they love their brother Judah and they want Judah to have access to the same blessings. But the problem is the church has become in a state of idolatry. And so I understand why there is a middle wall of partition there. It's not just the Jews who put that middle wall of partition there, it's the church too. Because in the Council of Nicaea and Laodicea, they decided to do away with the feast days and change them into pagan days like Easter and Tammuz, which is they have renamed Christ Mass. Notice Mass, that's Catholic. That is a pagan concept. So they put all of that in, and they got rid of the 7-day Sabbath. They instituted Sunday. And remember that even the Apostle Paul warned his followers. He said, when I die, grievous wolves shall come in, not sparing the flock, and men of perverse mind shall come and arise from within. He said, men of perverse mind will arise from within and turn many away from the truth. What is the truth? Psalms 119, verse 142. Thy Torah is an everlasting Torah, and thy righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and thy Torah is the truth. Psalms 119, 142. Thy righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and thy Torah is the truth. That's the truth. And Paul says that they're going to turn many away from the truth. Well, that's what happened in the Council of Laodicea and Nicaea. They turned many away from the truth. There were grievous wolves who came from within, and they converted what was we would call it the primordial Christian assembly of commandment-keeping Christians, and they converted them into Christians who don't keep nearly as many of the commandments anymore. And that's been going on for 2,000 years, except for within the last 50 years. With the resurgence of a knowledge, Daniel in his prophecy says, men shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase in the end of day. Well, what's been increasing? A knowledge of Torah amongst people who aren't even Jewish, but they are the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and they accept Yeshua Messiah. Okay. So he's got quite a few misconceptions here, this Tovia Singer guy. All right, peering back into world history, it would probably be quite difficult to imagine another program that has been a more miserable failure than the church's persistent effort to convert Jews to Christianity. That's kind of hard to say when you're losing 8,000 a year of your own buddies. Christianity, isn't it there, Mr. Tovia? I don't know how you could have the chutzpah to say that. When you're lamenting in the beginning of your book, you're losing 8,000 of them, which I still think is a very conservative number. But now you're saying it's a failure. Well, they must be doing something right. Christianity swept through Europe and Latin America almost overnight. Yet the Jews, despite the unyielding persecution and forced exile that they endured rather than embracing Christianity, still will not convert. Well, you know what he could be talking about is in the Middle Ages, where there was a lot of persecution of Jews. Yeah, that's not a very good method of conversion, is it? To persecute family members of Jewish people that you want to convert, or convert by the sword. That's not exactly, I can see how that would be counterintuitive in terms of conversion. So that might be what he's talking about in the Middle Ages and so on. Christians have always been puzzled by why it's been so difficult for the church to persuade the Jews to embrace Jesus as their Messiah. They wondered why the Jews failed to grasp that their own Bible predicted that the Messiah would die for the sins of the world. Are they just dense? Well, there's a lot of things going on in this statement here. But yes, he is right in a sense that converting Jews in times past, when there was great persecution against Jews, was a difficult endeavor, because, I mean, how do you convert someone that you're being mean to? Not exactly the best methodology there if you want to win them over. It's kind of like you attract more bees with honey than you do with vinegar. You know what I mean? Evangelicals sought to understand why it was so difficult to convert Jews. In recent times, with the approach of the end of the second millennium, evangelicals were faced with a serious dilemma. Interesting that he would recognize that we're close to the end of the second millennium. Isn't that interesting? Because that's kind of goes against his own timeline, doesn't it? Because I think they have this crazy idea that there's still 600 or some years left, something like that, before the Athid Labo. Evangelicals were faced with a serious dilemma. How could they successfully induce the chosen people to choose the cross? This quandary presented a considerable challenge to the church. Let's see, before I go on, where is my... I thought there was a timer on this somewhere. I really wanted a timer. Looks like the timer is not on this here. All right. With the year 2000 in sight, two critical this here. All right, let's continue on. With the year 2000 in sight, two critical conferences were convened during the mid-1970s. The most significant symposiums were held in Switzerland and Thailand. The mystery they sought to unravel at these gatherings was simple. Why has the church been so unsuccessful in their past efforts to convert the Jews? Remember, this is in 1970. This is after the establishment of the nation of Israel. Very significant to consider this timeline here. What new techniques can the church employ to finally attract masses of new unclaimed Jewish souls? Well, isn't it interesting that 1970 the church decided to, get a clue. The church decided to get a clue and realize, wait a minute here, maybe the Jews aren't cut off like Martin Luther claimed they were. And how Martin Luther basically, laughed at the Jews and said, look, you've been going for 1,500 years without a nation. Now suddenly they have a nation, 1948, and suddenly the church gets the bright idea, wait a minute here. We might have been looking at things a little wrong here. We might have been, we might have cast out the Jews before really analyzing what God was doing and what his intent was for the Jewish nation. So they decided to come back together and convene and study these questions. Probably what they were also doing is they were trying to figure out, how are we going to respond now? Because for centuries, we have said the Jews will never go back to the land. And yet, voila, here they are, back to the land. All right, so let's see here. Christian leaders grasped that the church had a considerable PR problem with the Jews. Yeah, I'll say. You spent all those centuries thinking that the Jews were done for and persecuting them and harming them. Yeah. It was at this unlikely location that devout evangelists placed the Jewish people under a microscope. It was at these symposiums that these Christian leaders grasped that the Jews posed a number of unique, serious challenges. First problem they discovered was that the church had to overcome a significant public relations problem. Probably. Yeah, if you killed a few million of them, or however many were killed in the Middle Ages. Not to mention the pogroms and all of this garbage that the church did to the Jewish people. They concluded the Jewish people historically tend to equate Christianity with persecution. That's right. Jewish people often feel somewhat uncomfortable just hearing the word Jesus Christ. Yeah, because it was used as a switch instead of a hand of love, the Jewish people. And when they see as a cross or a church icon, it rarely conjures up warm, affectionate feelings. Well, I can see why. When you've got soldiers bearing those crosses, bearing down on your villages with swords out and, killing everybody left and right. On the contrary, whereas Christians tend to feel quite comfortable in synagogues or observing Jewish ceremonies, Jewish people tend to feel alienated by the church and its rituals, probably because some of them are so alien to even the Torah or the prophets. They're alien to the Torah and the prophets. I'll say that. We love the Jews. Tackling this public relations problem head on, these evangelists embarked on a nearly unprecedented, clever strategy. It goes something like this. You're Jewish? We Christians just love the Jewish people. Persecution? Oh, no. Any Christian who persecuted a Jew in the name of Jesus couldn't be a real Christian. A real Christian only loves the Jewish people. Well, that is a bit of a shifting of their gears, isn't it? Yeah, I can see why Tovia Singer might look at this with some degree of skepticism. Suddenly they've changed their tactic. This novel technique enabled Christians to freely evangelize Jews while distancing themselves from their Christian forebears. This way, potential Jewish converts will not feel as uncomfortable by their aggressive evangelism. Truth is, they had egg on their face when they realized the Jewish nation was returned. They have egg on their face. And so they had to reorient. And you know what? I do think sincerely there were some leaders who repented because they were under an erroneous assumption that is summed up in that diabolical book, in some ways diabolical, not in all ways, but in this part it was diabolical, in Martin Luther's The Jews and Their Lies. It had an enormous impact on Christian leadership throughout the centuries until the Jews were brought back to their land. And then they realized, wait a minute, we messed up. Maybe we need to reevaluate our relationship with the Jews. These evangelicals realized, however, that the Jews would not start converting to Christianity simply because evangelicals condemned anti-Semitism and are staunchly pro-Israel. Smothering us with love would not go far enough to achieve their ambitious goals. They concluded that the essential reasons why Jews resisted conversion are that we are proud of our ethnic identity and do not want to stop being who we are. I.e., what they really meant was those Sabbath keepers aren't going to give up the Sabbath and abrogate it for the first day of the week, most likely. We view Christianity as completely alien to the Jewish faith. Yeah, by that time it had been completely alien, ever since the Council of Nicaea and Laodicea. The primordial Christian assembly looked just like a Jew. They could go in and out of the synagogues, and nobody would think of them different. Because the only difference between them and the Jewish religion, which was a Torah-based religion, was that they believed that Yeshua was the Redeemer, that he was the Lamb which was slain from the foundation of the world, and that he was the pathway whereby their sins could be forgiven, not just covered over like Yom Kippur, the covering, literally forgiven and paid for by innocent blood, and that was by the blood of Yeshua. Armed with these new insights, these zealous Christians developed a fresh and simple approach to Jewish evangelism. Let's see here. We have Pesach. There we go. They got Pesach there. The Messianic Passover Haggadah. Fresh and simple approach. The new sales pitch sounded like this. When you're becoming a believer in Jesus, you are not converting to another religion. On the contrary, you're becoming a fulfilled Jew or a completed Jew. And you know what? That is the honest truth. It's the honest truth. Guess what? Do you know that some of those highfalutin Pharisees believed in Jesus? And they still kept going to synagogue. They just secretly believed in Jesus. We know that by the Gospels. And even today, some rabbis secretly believe in Jesus. They dare not say anything. They'll get kicked out. Dare not say anything. After all, Jesus was a Jew and his followers were Jewish. Therefore, it stands to reason that believing in Jesus is the most Jewish thing you can do. They also developed the slick idea of messianic synagogues, which are designed to look nothing like a church. They are deliberately built, furnished, and decorated to resemble a typical synagogue. Their members make it clear that they do not observe Christian holidays. Actually, it's not a Christian holiday. I challenge him on that. It is a pagan holiday it's kind of like putting lipstick on a pig. That's what you've done with Christmas and Ishtar. Put lipstick on a pig. They're not Christian holidays. The Christian holidays, if you really want to think about it, well, go to Leviticus 23, and it says, these days are the feast of the Lord. Christians claim to follow the Lord, but they don't want to follow the feast of the Lord. And they haven't done so since the Council of Nicaea or Laodicea. And remember that it was done by the edge of the sword, that it was done by force. The bishops who dissented from changing the entire pattern of worship, they were slain and put to death. Papias, one of the early church fathers, he was slain and put to death because he wouldn't give up Passover in favor of this bunny and egg baloney that the church is doing. Understand that. So here is Tovia talking about the slick conversion. A Messianic congregation never featured a Christmas tree or blinking colored lights around the end of December. Instead, these missionaries celebrate Jewish holidays with a Christological spin. That's because there is a Christological spin to it. Christian doctrines were meticulously inserted into every Jewish tradition. Actually, the Christian doctrines were always about those. They were those that testified of the coming of Jesus and his second return. They were those who testified of it from the beginning. This was how God was communicating to his people at Mount Sinai, that in these feast days, they testified as to God's plan of redemption for humanity. Okay, so here he shows this Passover Haggadah. Okay, includes a 3-course Mediterranean banquet. Man, I could use some Mediterranean food about now, but how do you find that in Podunkville, where I'm at right now? Celebrate the Passover of the Lord with all the special sight sounds. Heritage Fellowship. Passover is a biblical festival. Remember the redemption and deliverance that we received through Yeshua, our Messiah. Yeshua was crucified, buried, and resurrected during the feast of Passover. Well, resurrection during first fruits. Come and see how this special feast, given thousands of years before the birth of the Messiah, points to our Savior. It will change your life, and so on. Okay. All right, so let me see here. I want to check something on my Facebook live stream. Why do we not have... Okay, let's see here. We've got about 15 minutes more. For example, Messianic congregations hold elaborate and well-publicized Passover Seders throughout the world. The Messianic Passover Seder. At first glance, a Messianic Seder table appears traditionally Jewish, with all of the customary essentials, Seder plate, matzah, and wine. Once the ceremony begins to unfold, however, even the most uninitiated will immediately grasp that something is askew. Something is askew. Huh? Participants are told that the wine at the Seder represents the blood of Yeshua, and the matzah represents his body. Do you know the real reason why Jews have 3 matzah at the Seder table, they were asked? To represent the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Now, some of that might be inventive. I admit, some of that could be inventive. In there. As to why, remember that the Seder was developed by the rabbis, and a lot of that symbolism came through the Talmudic times of, they just developed this. Just for example, the egg. When you think about the egg, that was not in earlier Seders. That is because they went through some really bad times, and some rabbi somewhere said, look, we don't have enough money to buy lamb, so we're going to put egg there instead. They took it upon themselves to do that, and they think they have that right. They think that they can control things in heaven. They basically think they have God on a leash rather than God having them on a leash. You understand the mentality of the Jewish authorities. They think they have, and by the way, the Catholics think the same way. They think they have God on a leash rather than God having them on a leash. Okay, that's essentially the mindset. Okay, so this talking about how this Seder is. Let's take a look at this here. Don't you know that a little yeast works through the whole dough? Get rid of the old yeast, that you may be a new batch without yeast, and you really are, for Messiah, our Passover lamb, has been sacrificed for us. Right. 1 Corinthians 5:7. So we know that Paul kept Passover and all of the immediate disciples kept Passover. We know that historically. The church decided that was too Jewish looking. And part of it was because the Roman government was putting so much heat down upon the Jews. I think that the bishops just decided, well, we got to look like something different, or we're going to get caught up in the slaughter. I think that was part of it too. During this season of Passover, let us break our old habits of sin and selfishness and begin a fresh, new, and holy life. Okay, here's the leader. Lifting the plate, which contains 3 matzot. This is the bread of affliction, the poor bread which our fathers ate in the land of Egypt. Let all who are hungry come and eat. Let all who are in need share the hope of Passover. 3 matzot are wrapped together for Passover. There are various explanations for this ceremony. The rabbis call these 3 a unity. Some consider it a unity of the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Others explain it as a unity of worship, the priests, the Levites, the people of Israel. We who know Messiah can see in this the unique triunity of the God, the Father, Son, and the Spirit, 3 in 1. In the matzah, we can see a picture of Messiah, see how it is striped. Okay. But he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities, the chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with the stripes we are healed. Now, admittedly, some of this was developed by Messianic Jews to create some kind of a foundation, some kind of infrastructure for conversion from pagan Christianity to to a messianic kind of thing, which would adopt the Torah. See how the matzah is pierced, and I will pour upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and of supplications. They shall look upon me whom they have pierced. They shall mourn for him as one mourns for his only child. That's Zechariah. Removing and breaking the middle matzah in half, just the middle piece of the bread of affliction is broken. Messiah too was afflicted and broken. 1/2 is now called the afikomen, the coming one. It is wrapped in a white cloth, just as Messiah's body was wrapped for burial, wraps the afikomen. Okay, so this is from the Messianic Passover Haggadah. Haggadah simply means telling. To be honest with you, none of the primordial Israelites even kept what the rabbis are doing. That was all added. Now, I can prove that beyond a shadow of a doubt by looking through Talmudic literature. You can prove that. Probably what they did is they did something very primordial in the same way that it was done in the first Passover. They just simply made cakes of unleavened bread. They didn't go down to the Jewish grocery store and buy matzah. If you think that, you're silly. You're silly, I tell you. And if you think that there was all of this organization, no, that developed over the centuries, okay? That developed that way. And primordially, they probably, roasted an actual lamb. They didn't just go down to the grocery store and get a shank bone and say, this is my lamb. No, they literally roasted it over a fire. All right, so let's see here. So Passover family pack. Okay, everything you need to enjoy a Passover Seder dinner. Other Christian doctrines that are typically inserted into the Messianic Passover Seder include, do you know why the matzahs are perforated? Because Jesus was pierced through when he was crucified. Now, admittedly, that might be something they inserted into that. I don't know. I don't have knowledge on that. Just like the rabbis inserted their stuff, okay? Why does the matzah have stripes? Because Jesus had stripes across his back as a result of the scourging that he endured during his trial. Why is the middle matzah broken? Because Jesus was brutally broken on the cross. Why is the matzah wrapped in a white towel? Because Jesus was wrapped in a white burial shroud. Why is this middle matzah hidden? Because Jesus was hidden away in the tomb following his crucifixion. Why is the matzah brought back at the end of the meal? Because Jesus will return in the second coming at the end of days, the afikomen. All right, so Messianic congregations are rarely listed in the yellow pages as churches. Well, that's true. They're basically groups of people. They try their hardest to be listed with the synagogues. Additionally, the Messianic movement has created a remarkable tool for Jewish evangelism called a communications card. This card carefully teaches evangelicals how to talk to a Jew in a manner that will not alienate them as potential convert. A 2-column card, which is usually wallet size for easy transport and access, reads, okay, before we get to that, let's look at this Messianic Soul Winners card used to train missionaries how to convert Russian Jews to Christianity. Okay, so they're putting this into other languages, the Soul Winners card. Why is this widely sold Passover Seder dinner so different from all the others? Although it is difficult to tell them from packaging, it is a Messianic Seder kit available on online bookstores. Well, typically, the Messianic Seders in the plates, the actual plateware, some of them I have seen, they don't have these extra places that have been developed over the centuries by the rabbis, like the egg. They don't have the egg because, first of all, even a Messianic Jew would know you shouldn't have an egg on that thing. That's idolatry. I mean, that's harking back to the same religion that the Jewish forefathers adopted in following Ishtar during the kings of Israel. You shouldn't have anything that's fertility symbolism. You know, that's why the Messianic groups I've been in, they would never have that egg. That's a mistake. Let's see here. All right, so they got this little 2-column card. These are little reminders. Don't say Jesus Christ. Don't say, do say Messiah, Yeshua. Don't say convert. Do say Messianic, completed, fulfilled Jew. Don't say Christian. Do say Bible believer. A lot of this is just semantics. It's just language. It is following what Paul said. Now, when he said to the Jew, he meant to have an understanding of Talmudic rabbinical Judaism at that time, for greater or lesser. He said, you know, it's just reasonable that if you're trying to tell someone something, you want to bring down as many barriers as possible, and that is not dishonest, as Tovia would have you believe. That's not dishonest. That's called being smart. And Tovia doesn't like it that the Messianic Jewish people are smart. All right, so to the horror of the Jewish world, this is the tactic that has achieved remarkable success to the horror of the Jewish world. With the most vulnerable segments of our community, the very young, the very old, and our brethren in the former Soviet Union. Notice that he doesn't think the brethren in the former Soviet Union are quite as intelligent as whoever he hangs around with. Why are these at-risk Jews so extremely, you know, what makes me wonder is, why hasn't this guy done a good job of bringing some light into their life? And then he's upset because other people are. So, you know, I won't get on that one. Why are these at-risk Jews so extremely susceptible to this current missionary assault? How do evangelicals call our Jewish youth with relative ease? All right, Christianity had to be portrayed as Jewish. Christianity started out as Jewish, by the way. Whether he likes to admit that or not, it started out as Jewish. The Messianic movement's fundamental approach seeks to blur the distinctions between Judaism and Christianity in order to lure Jews who would otherwise resist a straightforward Christian message. Okay, there is little doubt that the intense obsession fundamentalist Christians have with Jewish evangelism contributes to the success of groups like Jews for Jesus. They're successful. If we were doing our job, however, a Christian mission to the Jews, no matter how creative, well-staffed, and well-funded, would pose little threat to the spiritual integrity of the community. Well, I guess what he means is if they were doing their job, getting more zealous secretaries. I mean, he did seem to think that the secretary, this other Messianic guy was like really, you know, on top of their game, and maybe they need to fire their bad secretaries and get some new secretaries. I don't know. He did make that comment earlier in the book. But a lethal combination of circumstances and factors contribute to the spiritual frailty of Jewish youth. Okay, I wonder what those factors could be. Do you think it's dead religion without the Ruach HaKodesh, without the Spirit of Almighty Yah? Could it be that the youth are getting online and they are seeing the fact that, number one, Jews don't use the name, they hide the name. And it's those of us who are the lost house of Israel that are bringing the name out again. And how many other issues to where they find out their religion doesn't exactly hold the water they thought it did, because there's a lot of tradition involved. Or the fact that the Jews, the only people who knew the truth about the mRNA shots, turned out to be those of the lost sheep of the house of Israel, or Christians who might not be part of that group, who might not even know who they are, but Christians. Because they knew that at least a little bit, you shouldn't be slaughtering babies and putting that DNA in that shot and taking that thing. Or the fact that most of the Jews in Israel had just total trust of government. You would think that they would have developed a mistrust of government after going through what Hitler did to them. But no, they're all in on the government. They trust the government. The government says, take this shot or else, they take it. If the government says, get onto that cattle car, we're taking you to a nice, apartment complex, they get on. You see the problem here. So that's my commentary. This is why he's losing people. Stand up and get some chutzpah about you. Only now are many of the Jews in the United States starting to wake up and realize, maybe we shouldn't have voted Democrat, because these Democrats want to remove our ability to defend ourselves against these terrorist crowds that are coming in doing us harm. Takes them a while to figure it out. Well, let's hope they do. Let's hope they do. But a lethal combination of circumstances and factors contribute to the spiritual frailty of Jewish youth. And this is his, he's got his list of things as why 8,000 or more are converting. So he wants to stop the hemorrhaging, right? Teenagers and college-age youth are often curious and wide-open spiritual suggestions. Young men and women are particularly vulnerable to evangelicals because they too often, these adolescents are unsure of themselves, the world around them, and the adulthood that awaits them. Teenagers and college-age youth are seekers by nature. They are searching for an identity of their own. I wonder if Tovia Singer has ever had the thought hit that iron dome of his that maybe they make the bar too high, and so a lot of the Jewish youth get discouraged. They certainly make it awful high for converts. They make it awful high. They are often intrigued by spiritual suggestions and striking ideas, especially those that controvert and challenge their family's belief. Moreover, adolescents may not be emotionally well-grounded, and they often struggle with a low self-esteem. So it sounds to me like he thinks that it's just a bunch of youth that are converting. But if we were to look at the statistics of the people converting, I bet you there would be a lot of elderly people too. Well, he does acknowledge that. He basically says the Russian ones are just totally ignorant, and that's why they're being hoodwinked by the Messianic Jews. For most emerging adults, the university campus is the place where they experience full autonomy the first time in their lives. A paltry few of our kids are sent off to a university campus armed with a strong Jewish education. Missionaries are well aware of how lethal this combination is for Jewish youth, and as a result, they devote a great deal of their vast resources to Jewish evangelism on campus. All right, so here's a Jewish IQ test. Let's see. Frequently give the young students a Jewish IQ test when I lecture at Hebrew schools. He says, I do that. Tell me, I ask, what was Jesus's mother's name and what was Moses' mother's name? Okay, well, okay. So, and then they all know that Mary was the mother of Jesus, yet few of them know the name of Moses' mother. Okay, asking for the names of any two books in the Talmud and any two books in the New Testament will invariably elicit the same type of response. Typically, the kids could rattle off the names of all four Gospels in the Christian Bible, yet are clueless about the names of the tractates of the Talmud. Maybe that's his problem. He's focusing on the tractates of the Talmud instead of focusing on Bereshit, through Devarim. Maybe that's his problem. You think possibly that he wants to get them into boring commentary rather than getting them into the meat of the word? Well, he's too afraid. He's too afraid to have his Jewish students actually study Bereshit, through Devarim. Too afraid of that. Because the whole thought process has to be controlled by these centuries of commentary, these rabbis in the Talmud, right? For the most part, we raise a generation of children who know little about the faith they are being asked to abandon. All right, so I think that's probably pretty good to stop for today. Let's see here. Let's see. Oh, by the way, this is the Messianic Jewish symbol. It's you see the fish here, which is mixed in with the menorah, and you get a Star of David. And I actually had one of those a while ago. Well, next time we're going to pick it up on page 28. And I hope you guys have some comments. Put some comments down in my YouTube video. And this is it's actually, in some ways, this is not only it is enlightening in some ways it's entertaining, in some ways it's interesting to just see how he thinks. It's clear that Tovia Singer has no clue about the differentiation in all of Scripture between the house of Israel and the house of Judah. That's because he's following the rabbis, and the rabbis basically, they never believed that Almighty Yah would bring the house of Israel that had been lost and cut off and divorced back into a marriage covenant. This is one of the reasons why Yeshua Messiah had to die on the tree, because it says, unless the husband dies, the wife cannot remarry. But Yeshua died, but he was rose again. And as a new man, as a new being, he then betrothed the lost sheep of the house of Israel to himself. And that's also the part that the church doesn't teach. That's an important part that the church needs to teach, because that now you're speaking Jewese. Now you're speaking Torahese. Now you're speaking prophecy. Now you're speaking history, you see. And so that's also something to consider. Okay, so next time we will start page 28. All right, guys, put your comments down there. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Shalom, shalom.